Silent Hill 2 has steadily become one of my all-time favorite horror games. I'm not talking about the original either. People kind of have this notion that the OG game is better than the remake, which is just not true. Granted, there is a lot that the remake owes to the original game. Like apparently a lot of the story beats are very similar, which explains the acting in the game and how all the characters carry themselves. There's something about it that feels old school, like watching a TV series from the 90s or a movie from the 80s. Everyone's so soft-spoken and not afraid of silence.
I didn't do anything. He was like that when I got here.
Oh, you mean the man back there? In the kitchen?
I didn't do it. I swear I didn't kill him.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm not saying that you did. Look, my name is James. James Sunderland.
Eddie.
I honestly found it to be very refreshing compared to the hardcore acting that we're used to seeing in games like The Last of Us. I'm not trying to say one is better than the other, just that for personal preference, I actually really like how Silent Hill 2 presented its story. And while the story is going to end up being the driving force for a lot of people, it's not the highlight for me. But let's get something out of the way when we talk about the original Silent Hill 2 versus the remake. While people remember the atmosphere and the story, what they seem to forget is the dumb cryptic puzzles or really bad gameplay. Thankfully, the remake rectifies both of those qualities. I don't think the game's gonna win any awards for its combat system, but it's functional, and in a way it feels like it's clunky on purpose, because you don't want to end up being too overpowered in a horror game, otherwise it loses its fear factor. Basically, all you have to defend yourself is your melee weapon, which runs the risk of you getting hit when you go up close and personal. There is a quick dodge, which does give you iframes, but you gotta time it correctly depending on the difficulty that you're playing the game on. While a higher difficulty won't necessarily make the enemies have tankier health pools, it'll make them hurt you a lot more, and they'll also be a lot more aggressive. If you don't want to take the risk, this is where the guns come in. But the character you're playing as isn't a Marine, so his aim kind of sucks. He's wobbling all over the place and he doesn't reload the gun particularly fast. There's also only a handful of different guns, but each of them serves their purpose. And the strategy comes in with when should you use your gun and when should you use your melee weapon, because ammo is extremely scarce. At least it was at the early game. When I got to the later portion of the game, I had an overabundance of healing items and ammo. If there's one thing that I would nitpick, it's that there's not much of a variety in enemy types, but the enemies that are here are used very effectively until the end of the game. But what about the puzzles? Honestly, I loved them. They were all logic puzzles, and I was able to solve all of them without looking anything up online. There was just enough information given to the player for them to solve it at their own pace. Don't get me wrong, some of these puzzles can be devilishly difficult, but for whatever reason, the way that the puzzles were presented to me, I was able to solve them all pretty quickly. That said, I think I got lucky with some of them because I could totally see these puzzles giving people a really hard time. I think what deserves praise above all else for the Silent Hill 2 remake is the sound design, in particular the spatial awareness. The last game that I played that sounded this good was New World, but New World was an MMO, so the sound design was just really good, but it didn't quite matter for the gameplay. Silent Hill is a horror game, so the sound really carries it. The fact that you can hear enemies one room over from you, or the curtains rustling in the wind. But then you got some weirder stuff, like hearing voices that literally sound like they're whispering in your ear. This game experiments with 4D sound like I haven't seen in another game. And you wanna know why it sounds amazing? Because it's authentic to the original, because they got the same sound designer on the remake. And the crazy thing is, with how horrifying this game is, it only has like maybe 1 or 2 jump scares. So if the sound design is this good, does it mean that the other aspects of the game are lacking? No, it's just that the sound design is so good, it elevates everything else. Lastly, let's talk about the presentation of the game, because the game looks fantastic. It's made in Unreal Engine 5. However, there is a little bit of a caveat, because the game does not run well. There's a lot of different settings you can tweak to get the game to run at stable frame rate, and I have a video that highlighted just that. But keep in mind, I do this for a living, so I have a god tier PC with a 4070 Ti, and you're telling me that I'm getting frame rate dips in this game? Like, what? I can't say how it runs on the PS5, but I'm assuming that the graphics quality is significantly lower to get it to run at stable 60. While I do have my complaints about performance, I was still playing this game with everything maxed out. But what about replayability? I think a lot of people will be satisfied just beating the game once and moving on, but there is New Game Plus. It's not like Resident Evil, you're not getting a whole bunch of different toys to play with each subsequent playthrough, but you do get a really strong melee weapon that can destroy most bosses, and the opportunity to get new endings in the form of items that won't appear until you're on New Game Plus. Near as I can tell, you have to beat the game a total of 3 times in order to get all 8 endings. And I have a video plan that's gonna go over all of that, but I'm still trying to beat the game for a 3rd time to get footage for it. So overall, would I recommend Silent Hill 2 Remake? Yes, I would. I would already recommend it based on the gameplay alone, but what really crept up on me was the story. I love the world, and I love the reason why things are the way they are. And although it's very sad and heart-wrenching, I was completely invested in the story from start to finish.